The Federal Deficit Does Not Matter, video number 8, subtitle The Chant. P.O.F.O.S.I.E. In this video, the idea of the chant is presented, but first we must ask this question. When is the last time you have heard anyone openly discuss, either pro or con, on the national scene in depth in any form of news medium, the subject of our irrelevant federal deficit? The answer is that you haven't heard anyone on the national scene engage in any serious, in-depth discussion about our deficit, and only tepid discussions on the different social media formats. The reason why this is so is because when this subject is engaged on the national level in prime-time news coverage, then it will become blatantly obvious that the deficit is irrelevant, and then the ramifications of this reality will begin to slam home, and a lot of very prominent, very rich people who have become very rich, in large part by withholding this information, this new paradigm from we the people, while capitalizing on this financial reality behind the scene, will eventually be exposed. I'm talking about federal government contracts and federal legislation such as the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2018 and the like, being used to financially support and enhance certain former federal employees and maybe a current politician or two. As an example of one of those major ramifications, the elite and the private sector, as well as their lobbyist-controlled elected puppets in both political parties, not to mention the corporate elite fake news media, does not want you, the American people, to realize is that we can have a single-payer/universal health care system, and here is the really sticky part. It can be completely paid for with we the people's electronically generated monies, the same way we pay for a quarter, if not more, of our federal expenditures already, but our federal employees from our president on down does not want this reality to be shared with we the people, and one of the main reasons is because in order to have such a healthcare system to work without triggering a massive run of inflation is to not have the gangster health insurance companies involved in healthcare in any way, shape, fashion, or form. And to be completely honest, such a healthcare system will require some price controls, as in New York City having their rent control system so that they don't have the same kind of disastrous, out-of-control housing prices in New York currently being experienced in California. The people who do work in healthcare and administer the system will still be employed, as well as there being thousands more hired, and they will probably get a raise along with their and our complete healthcare coverage. But our president and the lobbyist flunkies in Congress in both parties and the fake news media will not allow you to even discuss this subject in a national format, and again, because the end result is that some elitists will lose a source of income that they should have never had in the first place. This denial of a healthcare system and many other such programs paid for with we the people's electronically generated monies is what you are allowing. This is what you are denying yourself and your family by not insisting upon a public discussion about the federal deficit being irrelevant. It's not like I am the only voice out there speaking up about this subject. There are several very prominent individuals who have spoken publicly about the federal deficit being irrelevant, and these are the people that I am aware of, and there are obviously many more who have not, will not come forward, but the ones who have made a public statement about the deficit being irrelevant are former President George W. Bush, former Vice President Dick Cheney, Warren Buffett, A.O.C., Geraldo Rivera, and Juan Williams. And just in case you are wondering, no, I am not an economist, nor are any of these other people just mentioned, nor do I have an advanced degree in a related field of economics, and if I did, it would be just as irrelevant for me as it is for all those who do have these college and university degrees, because this subject is not addressed and certainly not taught in a formal setting in any college or university anywhere in the entire world. So what is the relevance for having these degrees if the how and whys of the irrelevance of our federal deficit isn't taught? This subject is forbidden, is the feedback I have received from a couple of college students. They said that their professor will dance around the subject in private in his or her office after class, but never in class. What does that tell us? One thing it tells us is that the young people today are now receiving the same dumbing down, the same brainwashing treatment received when all previous generations were in college, and it must end soon, or we will lose our democratic form of government altogether. To put it bluntly, the understanding of the how and whys of our federal deficit being irrelevant has to do with intelligence, as well as the ability to accept reality. And once again, this subject is not taught in any college or university in the entire world, and it is impossible to teach intelligence or the acceptance of reality, as you well know. In the hopefully near future, our teachers and professors will be taught and will be allowed to teach the more intelligent who are able to accept reality, the how and whys of the deficit being irrelevant, and then to explore the profound ramifications which are staggering. But until you and I as an individual does something, it won't happen. And we are in very serious trouble as a nation, and that we are on the very verge of becoming the United Mafia States of America, and you surely don't want that. You can, as an individual, do something thanks to there now being the several social media platforms like YouTube, and you can begin with clicking on the subscription tab and then the notification bell, and don't forget to tell your friends about this channel. Here is something else you can do that won't cost you a cent, and it is to leave a comment below. Get the discussion started, pro or con, and if you don't leave a comment because you just don't want to get involved, or because you are afraid that the government or one of the alphabet government agencies will get you, then you should be informed. They have already gotten you, have they not? This is a chance. This is our chance as a nation to break free. Things are bad, really bad for some people, while our president and the corporate fake news media are pushing this false utopia, except for Tucker Carlson with Fox News and maybe one or two others. We can have a near utopia, never a complete utopia, because man, the male and female of the man species in our current state of being, is just not capable of such an existence. In the meantime, our public acknowledgement by the majority that our federal deficit is irrelevant is a major first step toward we the people realizing our manifest destiny, so that we can begin to reach for this near utopia, which, by the way, some already seem to have here in the good old US of A, and they live in this pseudo-utopia thanks to we the people's electronically generated monies. Another step you can take toward helping to fix our nation is to pick up a copy of my book, and yes, I will make a couple of bucks, but that's the bonus for writing a book that benefits in a very, very big way every person in our nation, and it is the revised second edition titled All About Equity Spending with a Love Story. However, if you already understand the how and whys of the deficit being irrelevant, if you already understand that by saying that the federal deficit is irrelevant means that we do not actually have a national debt, but rather we have a pretend national debt, if you already understand that by stating that the federal deficit is irrelevant means that there is no need for any type of federal taxation, and this ultimately means that we can and eventually will have no monies going into the United States Treasury, only monies going out, and you understand that this is where we can and are going, then you don't need to read my book, even though you would still enjoy it. But if you are wanting on any of these statements, you do need this information. Something else, if you think my having made the statements that have been made about this subject in my several videos has given away the substance of my literary contribution, then know that this is not the case. During all of my videos, the fictional novel section has been deliberately avoided, which, by the way, features interdimensional travel, artificial intelligence, invisibility, young love and romance, minus premarital sex, and minus the often obligatory profanity, as well as having a myriad of other story plot intricacies, which culminates in a welcomed enlightenment without insulting your intelligence, while definitely challenging your perception of reality, with all this resulting in you coming away enriched. And the fictional novel section will never become outdated, and it is the type of literary work you can and probably will read more than once and then again several more times in one's lifetime, and always receiving a little more, a slightly different perspective with each reading, as well as you probably feeling the need for having these same perspectives being passed on from you to your descendants. It is that kind of a reading. As for the continuing commentary section between chapters 19 and 20, well, that's a different story, and you will find enlightenment there as well, but this section will have to be revised after nearly every presidential election and will be under some headings, but certainly not all, which will result in having all the previous revised editions to become collector's items, while most of the different headings will remain the same for eternity. What is being suggested is that you pick up a copy of the revised second edition titled All About Equity Spending with the Love Story, and you will ultimately be glad you did. Some of you may, hopefully not, but may have a tendency to, shall we say, mistreat this literary work of art when reading certain commentary, and it is your literary treasure, so do as you please. Just be determined to continue on after you pick it up and dust it off, and this mostly relates to the continuing commentary section and has nothing to do with the fictional novel. You'll really love that. And take note, what I refer to as equity spending has nothing whatsoever to do with neither socialism nor communism. As for viewing my previous videos, you can be sure that there will be future videos, Lord willing, at least up to the point where I get rubbed out. I think that is the terminology the Mafia state uses, as in Remember Seth Rich. And before presenting the idea of the chant, allow me to offer up a preempted answer to the not yet asked question about why former President George W. Bush isn't more vocal in this matter, since he is the first prominent figure of any kind to go on the public record and state that the deficit does not matter. To me, it seems obvious that it is beneath the dignity of any former president of the United States of America to cajole, plead, and beg the people of our great nation to accept this reality. The scorn and ridicule heaped against me for trying to share this understanding about our federal deficit being irrelevant, along with the enormous positive ramifications, should not be suffered by any former president, and I am only more than willing to take this task on and the steed of former President George W. Bush and all others whom have not asked me to, because I really don't give a darn about the scorn and ridicule, so long as I am in the right, and I am in the right as far as this subject goes, even though not being the least bit prominent nor a celebrity. There is also a religious aspect to this whole affair, in that all that is happening and is going to happen is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And for those of you who are and have been praying to God for financial deliverance for our nation, it is requested that you would please consider this fact, this absolute truth. Your prayer has been accepted and granted long, long ago. This means that it is now time to pray for the ability to see and then receive this answer to prayer, and this seeing is largely contingent upon accepting the reality of how and why our federal deficit is irrelevant. And as far as how long ago it was that God answered your prayer, that will have to wait for another day, because for some of you it will be just too much at this time, and this is for both saints and unsaved sinners. We, the people of the United States of America, do not have a national debt, but rather we have a pretend national debt, and I dare anyone to prove otherwise, and this, of course, also means that our federal deficit is just that, a deficit, not a debt, and our federal deficit is irrelevant, which is to further support the fact that your prayers have been answered. As for the chant, it would be a case of extreme good fortune for there to be enough people to see this video in order for there to be a successful outcome, but herein is the plan, and if it were to be successful, it would also probably result in finding out just what kind of shape our country is in, as far as being able to determine whether or not the plutocracy-controlled kleptocracy or the mafia state has taken over entirely, which would be an eye-opener for a lot of people. The plan is that you folks who attend these political rallies will strike up the suggested chant in order to be able to see the reactions of these different politicians, and much more importantly, to ultimately force the subject of our irrelevant federal deficit onto the national scene in order to have an in-depth public discourse on this subject and the several related issues, which can only result in a very positive outcome for we the people. Let's say there is a presidential candidate who is about to come on stage and deliver his or her speech for either the right or left. They should come to the podium hearing this chant. P.O.O.F.O.O.S.I.E, stomp stomp, P.O.O.F.O.S.I.E, stomp stomp, or clap clap, or both. Then there is the longer version. The deficit does not matter, stomp stomp, and or clap clap. The deficit does not matter, stomp stomp, and or clap clap. Whichever chant you decide on, but the greater recognition for the entire subject would be to use both, though the P.O.O.F.O.S.I.E acronym would have a greater shock effect, since I have been using it as a greeting as well as a farewell in my correspondence with the media and politicians for many years, and it does practically say it all when it comes to the deficit, with this statement having greater clarity if you've read my book. I guarantee that you will be amazed by the reaction of the speaker or speakers, because they really do not want a public debate on the subject of our deficit, especially since it will result in the entire nation becoming aware that our federal deficit is irrelevant, which means that we don't really have a national debt, which means that we the people have been lied to for decades, as in we've never really borrowed even a penny from anyone, including China, in order to meet federal expenditures. Again, the success of this plan is mostly contingent upon this video going viral, so spread the word, with one reward for everyone being that we can end up using We the People's electronically generated monies to pay for We the People's single-payer/universal healthcare system, as in monetizing and or quantitative easing as covered in video 3, not to mention a myriad of other such programs that can never be realized if they are to be funded by a federal taxation, such as cleaning up our oceans and having a civilian air force almost exclusively for fighting wildfires, and with hundreds, if not thousands, of planes and helicopters. In order to have such programs to be implemented, we who do not have multi-billion-dollar lobbying firms behind us have to devise a way to be heard by our federally elected employees, and these political rallies are we the people's best chance, in my opinion. Please tell your friends about this plan so that we can realize the effectiveness of the chant. In closing, subscription tab, notification bell, and a comment if so inclined as you ponder this fact. No one in any format of the national public news media ever discusses the federal deficit, and especially when it comes to the deficit being irrelevant. This for me begs the question, what has happened to our country, our democracy? In the next video, we will address the subject of why it is so difficult for most people to accept the reality of our federal deficit being irrelevant, and it seems to be mostly because we are being required to alter, even reject, some lifelong beliefs as being false. My name is Oscar Dean Wyndham. Thank you for viewing this video. The transcript for video 8 is available on my Facebook page. There is one last bit of information to share, and it has to do with the ending of video 7, where it was stated that there would be a new video made to further illustrate the hypothesis or the fact that the word earth in English biblical scripture is a homonym, which sometimes refers to the word earth as meaning the planet Earth, and other times refers to the word earth as meaning the universe, as in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. That video has been made and is now on Vimeo, that's V as in Victor, I-M-E-O, along with my other videos, and it has also been posted on YouTube on someone else's channel. One of the tags for finding this video is the channel name, which is Earth Means Universe Means Earth, with Earth being capitalized both times and Universe being capitalized. And another subject addressed in this video, which is also the title, is the question, what is the universe expanding into? With having both being written out on the lower portion of my whiteboard. Until video 9, P.O.O.F.O.S.I.E.